And so today, the Gyeongsang Karmapa has asked that today, between 2 and 3 p.m., I should teach the 7 points of mind training in brief. This is what he asked me to do. So His Holiness doesn't have the time, and so today he asked me to teach the text today. And so I shall teach based upon the root text of the 7 points of mind training and fill it in with some points from the commentary. There's not enough time to teach the entire commentaries. That would take several days. And here's these are the instructions on mind training, the great path of awakening. The homage reads, with undivided faith, I place my head on the lotus feet of the perfect sage, who's first set in motion the wheel of love and triumphed completely in the two aims. To the renowned sons, the victorious one, I bow to Manjushri of Likiteshvara and the others, who set out in the ship of courageous compassion, now liberate beings from the ocean of suffering. The spiritual friend, the unsurpassable, reveals the noble path of compassion and emptiness. He is the guide of all victorious ones. I prostrate myself at the Guru's feet. My hero shall explain the one path on which all the victorious ones and his children have path. Easy to understand, it is not corrupted, easy to practice, it is entered with enthusiasm, yet it is profound, so Buddhahood is attained. This is training your mind in the Mahayana Dharma. It's training the mind. These are instructions that a teacher received from Serlingpa and other masters, and these are the Kadampa instructions. And so within the Kadampa, there are the philosophical texts, there's advice, and there are pith instructions. These are advice, and these are advice that are meant to be practiced. From the time of Gampapa onwards, the Karmakaju has practiced the Kadampa instructions and so forth, as well as the Mahamudra and yogos of Naropa that passed down from Naropa. And we practiced them together from the time of Gampapa onward. So Gampapa established a tradition, and from that time until now, all of the four elders and younger lineages of the Tapokaju have practiced in this way. So now we need to train our minds in the Mahayana Bodhicitta. From the time we've been young, we've taken many empowerments, we've had many vows, we've had many teachings on bodhicitta. All empowerments contain bodhisattva vows. There are bodhisattva vows in them, and we all know this. And so we need to practice in a way that fits with that. So now, in general, from beginning of samsara until now, we have wandered in the darkness of ignorance, and we have been overpowered by our attachments and aversions. And so our actual nature has been kind of hidden. We have been buffeted by our greed and hatreds, and because of that, we wander in samsara. But now we've met this lineage that combines the Mahamudra and Kadampa instructions. We have met great spiritual masters, and because now we recognize confusion as confusion, we recognize that as being mistaken. And so now, just to have taken the Bodhisattva vow, we need to train our mind. Now, because of what we deluded ordinary people are attached to ourselves. We have attachment to ourselves, and we basically have aversion for everyone else. Sometimes among the others are like our friends, our relatives, and the people who are close to our children and so forth. And we have some great faith in them, and so we are attached to them. But then, because of some circumstances, they will change. It changes, and we have aversion for them. Sometimes our love changes to hatred. This happens. It's like we can get angry. We can feel hatred for them at any time. It's not stable in any way. And so now we need to train our mind so that bodhicitta, so instead of not thinking about ourselves at all, instead we need to have loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta for all the sentient beings, and we need to put effort and work hard at doing this. And so, for example, it's the time when the Buddha was the king. When the king was when the Buddha was a bodhisattva, he gave his body to a starving tigress, and he gave his body. And so he realized that his body had no, but then he gave it to others. He was more attached to the other. And so there's a story of him doing this. And there are stories of the Chandraprabha giving his body, giving his head. There's a story of the king Shivi giving his eyes, and other stories in the Jataka tales. And when we look at them, there are quite a few, large number of them. And the Jataka tales are like there's just a drop from the ocean of all his previous lessons. They only speak the really important ones. They don't speak all the important ones. Over the course of 3 innumerable eons, he practiced the transcendent generosity during his practice, and this is all training his mind in bodhicitta of Mahayana. We've taken the vows, but we haven't trained our minds. Not only have we not trained the vows, it's like we're ready to do any things, or ready to do things at any time to break the vows. And so we need to train our minds, and as it's said this is said very clearly in the chapters on the way of the Bodhisattva, and arousing bodhicitta and dhyana and so forth. And it's also taught in other texts like the Ornament of the Sutras. And so there's so many things places where it's taught. And so these are also very large texts, so sometimes it's hard to get our minds around them, all of them. And so for wisdom, we have taken the instructions here that Tisha has taken many different stages of these, and Tisha's instructions. There are many different texts of this, and there are several different texts, the wish-fulfilling Chula Bodhicitta and others, and so there are many of these. And among all the different texts, there are the instructions by the Kadamba Geshe Chachakawa Dorje, which he condensed them all into 7 points and made them easy to practice. Actually, mind training is also contained within Chu. It's the main point of Machi Kalachi Dona's teachings. The basis of the teachings of Chu are the words of the Chu practice. These are the primary teachings, and then they're joined with practices from the Vajrayana. So first we need to practice the preliminary dharmas. And for this, you should visualize your guru over your head and ask him to please bless you to develop love, compassion, and bodhicitta. Recite this 100 or 1,000 times. Then imagine that it melts into light and then comes into a sphere of light in your heart. Then rest in that. And then supplicate and then you need to, in this way, supplicate that you develop mind training in your being. And then there are the preliminaries, the general preliminaries of precious human body, impermanence, karmic cause and effect, and the defects of samsara. And so first of all, the human body is difficult to find, but even though it's hard to find, there's also death and impermanence. Death and impermanence applies to everything. If we think about it for ourselves, in this world, we think of the most famous people. If you think about like the famous place in the world, there's Washington, D.C. in America. Perhaps you've go there, perhaps you won't. But that's not certain, but it's certain that we will experience death and impermanence. It definitely will happen. There's no way to avoid it. Who knows whether we'll go to America? We don't know about any other types of suffering. We don't know about the car accident or plane accidents or the serious illnesses or heart attacks. We don't know about those. But the suffering of death definitely will happen. There's no escape. Whether we get sick or not, no matter what happens, there's no avoiding it. So we need to contemplate death, because all phenomena and impermanence, the death and impermanence are certain. It's like when we were going abroad in an airplane, you're flying along and you're going every hour and every minute, you're getting closer and closer to the destination, like they show us on the little screen. And it's the same as we go through. It's like we get up in the morning, we get in the day, and we go within the 15th to 16th to 17th of the month, and then a month is over, then we get to the second month, and we get to the 10th, and so right, every day we're getting closer to death. And this gives all of us, some people, suffering. And then there are other things that give us difficulties. There are also things like the laws and difficulties and stuff. There are difficulties from spirits and ghosts and so forth. And so we do things to avoid them. We have rules in the world. We have protection cords that we wear under. But if you actually think about it, you actually shouldn't be afraid of impermanence at all. You shouldn't have any attachment at all to the worldly pillars. You shouldn't have any pleasures to power and so forth. If you get power, then you will experience. Then you do a lot of misdeeds. Then because of that, then you'll experience many suffering for many tens or hundreds of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. Once you've been a great person who has a lot of power, then there's no avoiding the suffering. But with the impermanence, but it's because we don't see things today. I feel like the stream enters and other noble beings who have seen the truth. They're terrified of impermanence. It's as it said, like stars or floaters or like candles, like illusions, dewdrops or bubbles, like dreams or lightning or else cloud. View all composites in this way. It's like a stars, like a candle just burrows every moment. Our mind goes from instant. It just goes from moment to moment. It's just like with a candle. It goes from moment to moment. It's interesting. You see, we only see the night. There's nothing stable about that. It's changing from moment to moment to moment. In the same way, we fear death and impermanence, and we need to contemplate that. Then there are the defects of samsara. There's no suffering. There's no pleasure in samsara at all. And karma cause and effect are unfailing. And we need to contemplate these. And we need to practice even the smallest of virtues and give up even the smallest of non-virtues. Even if it's just lighting a single stick of incense, or reciting a single mani, or reciting a single verse of going for refuge. We need to do as much as we can, as much as we can. We might think to ourselves, we shouldn't do the small ones, we should do big virtues. The small ones are nothing. That's people say that, but that is actually like business, Business want to do things, they want to get huge profits. They don't really worry about small profits like $10 or $100. Instead, they think about hundreds of thousands or millions. That's what they work to get. And so this is what they do. And they don't really worry about small petty amounts of money. And so if you think that we have to do the large virtues without worrying about the small ones, then that's just a question of being confused. We need to gather up even from the smallest of those virtues. And we also need to give up even the smallest of misdeeds. We shouldn't ignore even small misdeeds. As we go along on the path, we might step on bugs and so forth. And when we're washing dishes, we might watch on bugs. We shouldn't avoid that. We should try to get that. And so, as it said that we need to, when gathering water, we need to make sure that there are no insects and so forth in there. So in the old days, there were no faucets and so forth. You had to go fetch your own water. The bhikshus had to get their own water. They had their own water filters. So we need to do even the smallest of virtues. In the past, The people who had never studied Dharma at all, who had never studied, listened or contemplated the Dharma, these elderly people like this, would say that you should do large virtues and the small ones don't help. But this is a question of not knowing the Dharma, of not studying and contemplating the Dharma. So we need to practice even the smallest of virtues and give up even the smallest of these. We need to contemplate karma, cause and effect, and act in this way. First of all, here, there is the meditation on ultimate bodhicitta, and then primarily the main meditation is on relative bodhicitta. Meditating on ultimate bodhicitta is regard all phenomena as dreams, examine the nature of unbound awareness, even the antidote is self-liberated, rest within the nature of the all-grand, the essence, and post-meditation be a child of illusion. Regard all phenomena as dreams, like illusions, dewdrops, or bubbles, and so forth. In the middle way, we teach the various logics of neither single nor multiple, the Vajra splinter, and so forth. We train in these. There are a lot of these logics in the fundamental wisdom verses of the middle way, and so forth. And when we read these, so what these are all teaching is that we should have no attachment to phenomena as real. We need to use our inference to develop to have this. And when we have the pointing out the mind, we recognize it. Then it's also similar. We have to recognize that all phenomena are mind. So this benefits that. So this is regard all phenomena as dreams. And so this is examine the nature of unborn awareness. The mind is unborn. It hasn't been arisen anywhere. It arises every moment. If you look at it, it doesn't happen. It has no arising, it has no ceasing, it has nothing at all. It's emptiness. And if you know how to look at, then you look at the end. If you think that if not arising, that it's going to be blankness, nothingness, it's not like that. There's the essence of mind, is unceasing, but it's also undiluted. It should also be undiluted. It should be not diluted. It's not dark and blank and diluted. And this is very clearly explained in differentiating the middle of the Dharma, differentiating phenomena from their nature. It says, even the antidote itself liberated. Even the antidote to the afflictions is also liberated itself. And then you need to rest within the nature of the mind. And in the post-meditation, you need to contemplate that everything is illusory. And so they're the Mahayana 4 foundations of mindfulness. There's the mindfulness of body. And so to think that all your body is like a dream or illusion, primarily that is illusory. So if you feel this, then you realize that there's no fear, no attachment to feeling pleasurable feelings, no fear of feeling unpleasant feelings. All phenomena are empty and emptiness. And so you need to think of anything as like a child of emotion. Those of us who have been in the retreat center have had the instructions can visualize ourselves as the Idam deity. And so if you're a Kagyu, then you meditate on the Kagyu Idam deities. If you're Nyingma, you meditate on the Nyingma Idam deities, such as Hayagriva or Vajrakeila or so forth, and anyone. But they are like the union of appearance and awareness, like appearance in a mirror. And if you meditate on these and you see, so you meditate on this way and see everything is like a dream, and meditate on ultimate bodhicitta. And within that, there's neither any virtue nor non-virtue. And it's the primary meditation on bodhicitta is the meditation on relative bodhicitta. It says that, first of all, you recognize that there's not a single sentient being who has not been a mother. Now, our mother in this life is very close to us. My mother is this. This is my mother. If your mother is not yet passed away, you can say, this is my mother. If she's passed away, then you can think that the one who passed away was my mother. And because we can recognize, it's easy to know that she was your mother. If someone has been like hundreds or thousands of years ago, lifetimes ago, you don't know. Maybe some have been born as bugs, some have been born as dogs. We just don't know. And so there are many sentient beings that we don't know, that they've been some sort of sentient, born as some sort of sentient that we can't see. And if we think about this, then in the morning we give the water torments, in the evenings we give the smoke offerings, and we dedicate for them. Since we think that for all the sentient beings in the universe who have all been our mothers, we think about them and make these offerings. And this is how we benefit them. Because we cannot recognize which of our mothers are close or not. Because there's no beginning to samsara, so there's no sentient being who hasn't been our mother. So this is saying that all sentient beings have been our mothers. And then for Tonglan, then you should first think about your mother from this life. You should visualize in front of yourself. And sometimes here you have some motive and compassion. You think that your body was born from your mother's womb. Your body is produced by her blood. And your body comes from hers. If you look at when they examine it, you see like you've got the DNA is the same in the child as it is in your mother, right? And so as our mother, as our body becoming strong and powerful, is because of our mother. And when we learn how to speak, it's our mother who teaches us. Well, mom, or say, way. And we say something, then, and when we learn to walk, then the mother holds us up so we can learn, so that we can learn how to walk, right? Teaches us when we first take steps. It's our mother who teaches us. It's like the birds teach their chicks how to fly, right? It's exactly the same. Exactly the same. It's like the mother pushes them, and the chicks have to flap their wings, and then he makes them learn how to fly, and then they learn how to fly. And the mother also has to take your own spoon to hold your own food. And sometimes we go and we eat in our houses. Sometimes we go into big hotels or restaurants and we enjoy ourselves, and we eat all sorts of spoons and forks and chopsticks. And all of this we're taught by our mother. And so our mother is a really kind, sentient being to us. And so we need to think about her in this way. In Tibet, when it is cold, and children have to get up, they shiver in the cold because it's so cold. And so they don't shiver. The mother gets up first and warms the child's clothes, puts them by the fire, their coat or their pants, whatever the child wears. They warm that up. And then as soon as the child gets out of bed, they dress them in the warm clothes. They put on the warm coat, the warm pants. So that instead of shivering, their mother takes care of them so that they're nice and toasty warm. And sometimes Tibetans remember how kind their mother was, and they think about it, and they cry thinking about how she got up early and took care of them. And so soon to think about mother, and to remember the mothers from other lives and have a vast outlook and meditate on this. There's a story of Milarepa, right? He said that there's a teacher, a Kadampa teacher, who's going to come from Upper Tibet, and whoever brings him to meet me will not fall in the lower realms. So mother heard this, and she said, "Oh, if this were my daughter." She didn't think about herself. If only my mother is not born in the lower realms. And so she told her mother, and she called her daughter and had her daughter bring Gampopa up to see Milarepa. This is how mothers think. So thinking in this way, then we need to meditate on our mothers. Also, birds, when it's cold, they protect the mothers protect their chicks with the wings. The chicks are all chirping under the wings, right? And it's the same thing as with humans. That's the way mothers think. There's no sentient being who's not been our mother. Even the ones who sue us, who harm us, who put us in prison, who harm us in any way, all of those who give us hard time, they've all been our mothers, they've all been our parents. And so they've all done this. And so we need to think about them. And the love and compassion comes from the mother's character. Harm comes out of circumstances. It comes out of bad circumstances. But the mother's love and compassion comes from the nature of mind. She doesn't need any particular condition. There are no good conditions. It is just naturally there. Some people say my mother didn't treat me well. My mother is very cold to me, but that is because of circumstances. It's not because of her character. When you go and teach Dharma and mother, people will say, my mother didn't treat me well. She abandoned me when I was just born. But this isn't her character. This is because it's her nature. It is because of circumstance. Similarly, you should think about all sentient beings in this way until you feel compassion. You need to feel compassion for all sentient beings. Sending and taking should be practiced alternately. You should give your happiness and virtue to others and take the suffering on yourself. These two should ride the breath. You should alternate the giving and taking. So think about mother's suffering and think, can you take it to yourself? Think, may she have my happiness and virtue. This should ride the breath. It should go on the breath. As you breathe out, you imagine that all your breath, that the virtue all goes out like a clear light. In the past, there weren't so many, all just white. And so they have many different colors, and so you have a lot of different lights. So you have like this light from these tube lights that goes out, it goes straight out, and it strikes into every single sentient being, not dividing people, but dividing all sentient beings, so that they have happiness, they're free of suffering. It's because the misdeeds are because of circumstances. It's because of circumstance that we do that. But virtue comes to the nature of the mind. As it is said in where the Bodhisattva, that it's from the nature that the people are good, and the circumstance that they're not. It's like says begrudging it says like begrudging the sky for wafting smoke, and so you should remember this and think about this and meditate in this way. These two should ride the breath, and it's a very important pith instruction here. Of course, it's said in the sutras and in the dharanis, but the mind, it depends upon the winds, whether a mind is virtue or unvirtue, pure or unpure. These are all because of differences in the winds. It's because of different types of wind. And so the wind goes back and forth. And the different levels of intelligence come because of the winds, and the winds depend upon karma. So our intelligence comes because of the winds. Like little children have different types of minds. They like to play. They don't know how to think at all. And they just like to do anything at all. And so they'll run over the place, they'll run over on ice and so forth, they'll fall down and so forth. Old people have a different way of thinking. They think, oh, I'm tired. They just always speak and they can't do anything. And so the clear awareness have different, there's no change to that, but all the differences come because of the winds. The wind depends whether our mind is virtue or unvirtuous. And so when the winds aren't developed, you have a childish mind that isn't able to really do much. And when you become old, you can do something. And then when you get old, like when a baby is born, they don't know how to read or write. They can't learn the ABCs. It's only when they get to be the age of 7, 8 that they can learn the ABCs. So you breathe out and you breathe in. So these two, sending and taking, should breathe the breath. And you should meditate on this for a long time, because this is the main practice of relative bodhicitta. You need to meditate on this for a very long time. So you give away the virtue, you take on the suffering, then you give away your virtue, take on the suffering. And you should, by doing this, you can gather vast amounts of virtue. Following this is 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 roots of virtue, and all activities trained with sayings. Begin the sequence of sending and taking with yourself. When the world is filled with wrong, transform a misfortune into the path of enlightenment. All blame comes down to one thing: Be grateful to everyone. So far, that was the session, and then in the post meditation, you have attachment for attractive objects, hatred for unpleasant ones, and you have delusion for the neutral ones. You don't, because you're overcome by delusion, you don't know what things are, you don't know how things are, you don't know how they appear, you don't know into the ultimate nature, you don't know the various appearances. And you've got the different explanations of this, the different traditions, the great exposition, the middle way school, the mind-only school, the Rangtong and the Shendong schools, and the Vajrayana ways of thinking about this. And likewise, with the ultimate nature, there are many different explanations, but not knowing any of them and just staying there. And they need to transform the three positions into virtue. So you think, oh, my mind is deluded. That's delusion in my mind. And then you imagine that all of the delusion of all sentient beings dissolves into that, and then it eliminates all the delusion. When you have desire, then you recognize that desire is an affliction, and that all the desire of all sentient beings defiles into all the sentient yours, and that becomes emptiness and dissolves. Likewise with hatred. When you feel hatred, you imagine all beings' hatred dissolves into yours. So you make that aspiration that's happening. In all activities, train with sayings. And so whatever you're doing, you're reciting words, because when you recite sayings, then you think about the meaning. So in all activity, you playing the trains. So may all of their sufferings of may all the misdeeds of all sentient beings ripen on myself. You say things like that. May all sentients be happy. May they always be happy. May whatever aspirations the bodhisattvas have made ripen upon me. So this was a saying that Atisha was continually reciting, as it says in his Bhagavats. So we need to do the same thing ourselves. We need to recite these quotations. So we also recite the aspirations such as the one from the way of the Bodhisattva, the noble aspiration for excellent conduct, and train ourselves. Even when you write Om Mani Padme Hum, this has all of the meanings they're taking all the suffering of others upon yourself and giving happiness to others. All these are all complete within the Mani, each word of which, each syllable of which has many meanings. So beginning the sequence of tending and taking with yourself. So if you're unable to take other sentient suffering, then you take your own suffering upon yourself. Then when the world is filled with wrong, transform all misfortune into the path of enlightenment. All blame comes down for one thing. When the world, there's a lot of suffering and people accumulate misdeeds, and this creates difficulty for everyone. And when that happens, this is all because of not thinking about what is not a self to be a self. This ego clinging is the root of samsara. It is confused. It is mistaken. And you think that this all comes down to cherishing a self. And so, the hatred arises from our ego clinging, not from the enemy. It's like when you're doing a Gana Chakra. When the shrine master is holding up, they're saying the great heroes accept this offering. And the heroes means the heroes who conquer, who overcome the ego clinging and afflictions. Not an external enemy, but this is the great hero is someone who has overcome all of the afflictions and manifested the entire Buddha nature. And so this is what we call the Vira in Sanskrit. So this is what we mean by a great hero. Like when we do Lama dancing, we have heroes who are dancing, they're wearing masks and dancing and so forth. And it seems like they're killing an enemy, but that's not an enemy. What they're killing is the ego clinging and afflictions. And this is what we mean by a great hero. Like when we do Lama dance, we have the different great heroes. Like in the 10th day, the Seichu dance, like there are many different heroes, the fearless hero and so forth. There are many different heroes. And so these are all heroes who defeat the enemy of ego clinging and afflictions. Sometimes they wear elephant or tiger or human skins, and this is a sign that they have eliminated the affliction and ego clinging, because they've accomplished, and then the afflictions are like the hides of the hides of dead corpses, and they wear this as like an ornament. And this is like a sign that they have achieved complete victory over the afflictions. You have to go out to the forest and jungle and kill a tiger and wear it, skin their hide. That's not blood, but this if you overcome the hatred, and it's like you wearing the tiger skin as a symbol of that. And it's like when you've killed the delusion, which is like an elephant, you wear the skin. When you've overcome the desire, which is like a human, you wear its skin. And so this is showing this. And so this is what the wrathful deities are like. And this is be grateful to everyone. All sentient beings are completely kind to us. Because without sentient beings, we couldn't achieve enlightenment. You've got Buddhas, teachers, and sentient beings. You have faith and devotion for the teachers, but you have love and compassion for the sentient beings. You gather the accumulations by having faith and devotion, and by having love and compassion. And if there are no one to feel love and compassion for, you couldn't gather merit, and you wouldn't have all that you need to achieve enlightenment, to achieve Buddhahood. And so for that reason, you should think about all sentient beings, even ants and insects, even the bugs that live below the ground, and so forth, and all the very different animals, all the little animals everywhere. In English, they talk about the animals that live underground. They call them earthworms. They're not. Then people often look after these, right? They're like the wriggly little worms, right? These are what they're talking about. So that's how we should meditate. So when see the deluded appearances as the four kayas, as the unsurpassable protective, you have the empty essence is the Dharmakaya, and the various appearances are the Sambhogakaya. Or you have the union of the two truths is the Sambhogakaya. The clear appearances are the Nirmanakaya, and their union in the empty essence is the Essence Kaya. Four practices are the best of methods. We don't have time to go through each of the four practices, but they're complete in what we do. When we do the Dharma offering in the morning, when we do the smoke offerings in the afternoon, the burnt offerings in the evening, when we do the various different offerings, these all include generosity and the practices. Whatever you meet unexpectedly, join with meditation. When you encounter pleasure or pain or an enemy, whatever you encounter, you should join it all with meditation, sit in samadhi meditation, bring it into true Dharma, and join it all with meditation. Then we generally join it with the five powers. The five powers are, first is the power of strong determination. When we do the Munlam in the morning, we say, until I will use my body, speech, and mind for virtue until I achieve enlightenment. And this is the strong determination, or the propulsion. So thinking from now, so I'm not going to do any virtue. I'm going to say, we have a really strong determination in the morning, and we meditate upon that. Then that is a strong determination that propels us. Then after that, the second is the power of habituation. So forget about unvirtuous actions. We shouldn't even do neutral ones. We should try to do everything so that we practice the Mahayana accumulation of merit. And so practicing in this way is the power of habituation. So habituation is really important. In the world, there are many people who want to do virtuous things, but people who are habituated to it are very few. Many people are generous, and there are many people have kind hearts and give, but they aren't habituated to it. They give for a while, and then they get tired and they give it up because they're not habituated to giving. So when you get tired and give up, that's a sign that you haven't habituated yourself to it. You need to habituate yourself to virtue. So when you try to work hard and do something, you're trying to be diligent, but you need to be habituated to it. If you try to do something, then you give up, that's a sign of not being habituated. So we need to be able to do something continually, and that's a meaning of habituation. So whether it's generosity or practicing discipline, we need to be habituated to it. After that is the power of seeds of virtue. And so this means never being satiated with virtue. Always think you want to do. The more you do, you think to yourself, I haven't done enough. I need to do more. I need to do more vast. So it's never being satisfied with the virtue you've accumulated. Next is the power of remorse or repudiation. You think that it's because of myself that I've had all the suffering from beginning of suffering. It all happens because of the self and the self-clinging. And so it's like repudiating ego clinging. The last one is the power of aspirations, having good aspirations, like in the noble aspiration of excellent conduct, and always reciting aspirations. And so this is the power of aspiration, that you making all of our virtues with the aspiration. Like when the Buddha talked about the the preliminaries, the actual practice, and the aspiration, and the dedications. These are all complete in the aspirations. Next are the instructions on the ejection of consciousness at death. The Mahayana instruction for the ejection of consciousness at death is the 5 powers. This is at the time of death, you meditate on the Tonglen meditation, and you have the virtuous mind meditating that. Then when your mind stops, when your breath stops, then this is the best way to transfer to a good birth. This is the most beneficial way to do it. There are many more well-known or famous Poa instructions, but this is more beneficial because there might be impediments or obstacles in the other. If you don't have a virtuous mind when performing them, there is an obstruction. But here you have bodhicitta. You're training in bodhicitta, so there are no obstacles when to your transferring your mind. If you spend your entire lifetime in committing non-virtues, doing misdeeds, but then at the moment of death you have the virtuous mind, then you can be reborn in a good rebirth. There are many stories of this happening. However you conduct yourself is important. All Dharma agrees on one point. So all Dharma is the antidote for ego clinging, because you can give up ego clinging at any point. You think, I want to be happy, I want to have good time. And so all of Dharma comes down to this one point. If you can overcome the ego clinging, then your Dharma practice goes well. If you don't overcome the ego clinging, then all the problems happen. You violate samaya, you violate your vows, you have all sorts of difficulties. There are many people who've done a lot of practice, but then been reborn as ghost spirits. And this is because they have ego clinging and are reborn in bad roots. And this is because these are Dharma practitioners who've had obstacles. So it all comes down to our ego clinging. So always maintain a joyful mind. So of the 2 witnesses, he the principal one, and always maintain only a joyful mind. So here, so whether your Dharma practice is going well or not is something you know for yourself. You can only look at your mind. No one else can know. If you have a really evil mind, on the outside you're looking good and everything, then people fool other people. People will think you're doing well, but they don't know your mind. But your own mind is something you know yourself. If you think your mind is good, if you think your mind is good, you think your mind, you can be your own judge for yourself. You can judge, is your own mind the best? And so you should be your judge of your own mind, because your mind is not hidden to yourself. No one else can know, because they'll get fed. Because you can be very skilled in speaking, you may look good on the outside, but they don't know what's inside your mind that is hidden from them. So always maintain only a joyful mind. No matter how difficult you're having, no matter how terrible, you should always never be uncomfortable about it or unhappy about it. But you should also not be boasting about yourself. You should think, I've done some excellent things. You shouldn't be proud about that. And if you think, oh, I'm tired, I can't do this, you shouldn't feel unhappy about that. You shouldn't have any you should not disregard others. Instead, you should always just have a joyful mind. If you can practice even when distracted, you are well trained. Even when you practice, you can practice. You're well trained. And so because we were habituated for such a long time, whenever we're always distracted. And so we always lose ourselves to our distractions. That's because of habituation. So if you meditate on bodhicitta, then as you get habituated to it, then that'll change so that you can practice even when you're distracted. Always abide by the three basic principles. Change your attitude but remain natural. Don't discuss shortcomings. Don't contemplate others at all. Work with the greatest affliction first. Abandon any hope of fruition. So the three basic principles are three basic general Buddhist principles. The external bhava of personal liberation, the internal bodhisattva vow, and the secret mantra vows. And you need to practice them all the time. Or you can talk about it as the vows of body, speech, and mind. And you also need to follow those. Change your attitude, but remain natural. So to change your attitude, but you should be gentle to yourself and others. So instead of being gentle to yourself and hard to others, you need to be hard on yourself and gentle to others. So it's going to be talking about the meditate in the way of the Bodhisattva, where you exchange yourself from others, give others a name of yourself, and call yourself others. So meditate like this. So don't discuss shortcomings. When people have difficulties, when they have physical problems, if their bodies are a little crooked, or if they have disabilities, then you shouldn't call them by names. Don't contemplate others at all. You should only think about yourself. Don't look at others, only think about yourself. You shouldn't think, oh, that person's good, they're bad. Instead, you need to think about your others instead. So basically, don't think about others at all. It doesn't help it at all. Instead, you need to meditate on bodhicitta all the time. Should that person's really desires, that person's really hateful and so forth. Instead, don't think like that. Don't think about others at all. You should think about yourself. And should meditate on bodhicitta and not to scorn other people and not to look down at other people who have problems. Instead, you should have bodhicitta and make aspirations for them. So work with the greatest afflictions first. So whatever, some people have different amounts of the affliction. Some have more desire, more hatred, and so forth. Whatever is the largest for you is what you should train on first. Abandon any hope of fruition. So you shouldn't think about that you're going to get some happiness. You should only think that the result is going to happen to others. Think that other people have happiness. The state of Buddhahood is for others' benefit, not for your own benefit. It's in order to bring other sentient beings to the state of Buddhahood that I'm practicing the Dharma. And so it's like when you're giving an empowerment, you say, I'm taking this empowerment in order to bring all sentient beings to the state of Avalokiteshvara, and so forth. And so these are like the great 8 thoughts of a great being that are taught in the sutras and the treatises, and we need to practice according to those. All of our Tonglen meditation should be for the sake of others. So all our practice should be to benefit others and to limit obstacles for them. And so we need to take and think like when you're eating, we need to eat in order to be able to benefit others. And if you're going back to our monastery, think I'm going back to the monastery to practice Dharma for the sake of others. If I'm going to the Munlam, think I'm going to the Munlam in order to benefit other sentient beings. If you're going to something like the Kagyu Gunshin, that this is in order to eliminate the darkness of ignorance for all sentient beings, therefore I must increase my own listening and wisdom of listening and contemplating. And if you're able to do that yourself, then you're able to eliminate this ignorance of other sentient beings. So you should think to yourself, that is why I'm going to the winter teachings. It's not to get some sort of aim or to get some sort of a prize or to pass it. If you're thinking in that way, if you think about others, then your own benefit will come automatically. Respect and a good name will come automatically from that. Don't rely on old friends. So don't rely on old friends. This means is like, like don't have a grudge against someone and harbor that grudge for a long time. So basically not blaming others. So don't make malicious remarks. Don't say things that are going to harm other people. Don't shift the zozlo to the ox. So if you're going to have something to have a hard, don't give you what gives you a hard time to other people. Don't try to be the fastest. Don't try to get to the place of happiness before other people do, is what this is saying. Don't act with a twist. Don't try to do Dharma practice in order to make happiness for yourself. It's like when you get sick and so forth, and you give dharmas and so forth. But you're doing that in order so that you'll be able to practice dharma. You do you have bodhicitta, and you do these services for yourself in order so that you can be able to help other sentient beings. Don't make gods into demons. So gods means mind training. Don't change it into demons. No, don't make your mind training into working for your sake of others. Don't seek others' pain as limbs of your own happiness. So perform all actions with an intention. Correct all actions with one intention. So when you So when it's like, if you do everything with one intention, if you're rich in one lifetime, it's because of your previous lifetimes. When you become rich and well, there are people who are rich and well known in one lifetime. There are people like this. And if you enjoy that, but then your mind is overcome by the afflictions and you enjoy the time, and then you feel jealous of your enemies, you disrespect people who are lower than you, so they have nothing. I'm really impressive. They have no education. They have no money. They have nothing. But I'm really. But if you have like this mountain of pride, it's going to overcome all. It's going to destroy all of your virtue. It's like in one of our prayers we recite to talk about how the pride is like a great mountain that can destroy all of our virtue. And so when you're having a good time yourself, then you think, may all sentient beings have even more happiness than this. That is how you should do it. Perform all actions with one intention. So whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, you all should do it with the motivation of benefiting others. Whenever you're eating or performing and making offerings or so forth. You should do it with that one intention. So you should perform all actions with one intention. Correct all wrongs with one intention. It means when you lose your mind training, you need to protect it. You need to restore it with your mind training. Two activities, one at the beginning, one at the end. So if at the beginning you should do your bodhicitta, at the end you should have the dedications. Some people do things and they have a good time, and then eventually they get unhappy, and they perform misdeeds, and they try to do things to make themselves happy. They go to hunting birds or animals, and they enjoy themselves. And so sometimes rich people do this. Sometimes they go out hunting to enjoy themselves. But instead you need to change it all into into the Dharma. So if a good time, you need to transform the Dharma. If you have a bad time, you need to transform it into the Dharma. You need to practice the mind training. And you need to transform everything into Dharma practice. Observe these two, even at the risk of your own life. This means mind training. And when you're practicing, there are two things that you need to think that that mind training is more important than your life. Train in the three difficulties. So this is the afflictions. It's difficult to recognize afflictions when they arise. In the middle, it's difficult to block them, to stop them. And in the end, it's difficult to sever their continuum. That's extremely difficult. So you need to train in these three difficulties always. And so they're difficult to block, difficult to abandon. But if you're skilled, they can, because they're the instructions of the Kadampa and various other Dharma traditions, and you need to practice them. You can do the practice of the Vajrayana practices of the Idam deity, or do Chur practice. These are all of these practices these are all to stop the afflictions. Sometimes we have, like, we call backward or blocking affliction. Like when an affliction occurs, and we do meditation. When hatred arises, you meditate on loving kindness. When you have jealousy, then you meditate on sympathetic joy. And when you have desire, you meditate on you meditate on the unpleasantness and so forth. And so you always should train in these. So in these days, it's very difficult in these days, when the degenerate age, when it's difficult to overcome the afflictions. But if you have the faith and devotion and clear samaya, then it is possible to sever and completely stop the afflictions. Take up the three principal causes. Cultivate the three should never win. Keep the three indisciplines. Train without bias to all. It is crucial to do this deeply and pervasively. Always meditate on whatever riles you. So the three principal causes are having a good teacher, practicing Dharma properly, and having the favorable conditions for practice. These are the three principal causes that we need to continually try to cultivate. If you're in a big monastery life, like the seat of this monastery of Bokar Rinpoche, or the Kagyu monastery, or all this monasteries, the great lamas, the Karmapa and the Hartsvams have the monasteries, and the other monasteries, they all have all the facilities you need for practicing Dharma. And so you can go and you can put on the three Dharma robes, you can practice, you can study. That's very kind for you. You have all of the favorable conditions because of the Guru. This is the Guru and the administration's work, is to prepare these all for you. And so now you can study, and then you can go to the retreat center, and this is something that you don't have to worry about yourself. It's because of the Gurus, the kindness, that we are able to do this. So you should think that they're really extremely kind to you. They prefer providing all the favorable conditions for practice. If you go outside, if you try to get anything, you have friends, they're going to be wicked friends. They're going to bring you to the negative way. They're not going to bring you ultimately bring you any benefits. The spiritual friend is one who will bring you to the ultimate happiness. So cultivate the three should never wane. So the Dharma should, in brief, the result of this is the basis of the Dharma is the vows and the samayas. They should never let them win. Keep the three in densibility. You should always keep the virtue of the body, speech, and mind. Always have practice training in body, speech, and mind. You should train without bias toward all. You shouldn't think about some are good and some are bad. You should be pervasive to all way. And you should always, it's crucial to do this deeply and pervasively. Always meditate on whatever rasa, don't be swayed by circumstances. You need to use your body, speech, and mind for virtue. You need to employ them for the Dharma and to benefit sentient beings. Miller sat on rocks, and to the point where he wore off all the skin on his bum and his legs, and he's often stayed without any food, and he stayed until he's basically at the point of death. And he's saying this, giving up, meditating like this is for the benefit of the sentient being. This is like the greatest form of transcendent generosity. So training this way. So you should never be swayed by circumstances. When you have you shouldn't be immediately swayed by bad circumstances. You shouldn't depend on the conditions. So now when you have all the favorable conditions, you need to practice the Dharma, and in particular the Mahayana Dharma, And so you need to train your mind, in particular in the Mahayana. So right now, practice the main points. Don't misunderstand, don't vacillate, train wholehearted, liberate yourself through considering and examining. Don't anticipate, don't be irritable, don't be mercurial, don't expect it. The 5 generations running rampant are transformed into enlightenment's path. The essence of all alchemical instructions comes from the lineage of Serlingpa. Having awakened the karma of previous training and being urged on by intense dedication, I disregarded all misfortune and slander, and received the oral instructions on taming ego clinging. Now, even at death, I will have no regrets. You should not be you shouldn't be attached to worldly happiness. You shouldn't be like sometimes practice, sometimes do worldly and enjoy yourself. If you enjoy yourself, you should. This thing you shouldn't do that. You should always devote yourself to Dharma practice, and you should need to. But how this works, you should meditate for yourself. But you should also not be really pride about really practicing hard yourself. These are basically all the same. So it's saying, now even at death I'll have no regrets. If you are able to practice these explanations that come from said Lingpa, then you will have no regrets at the time of death. The result of this is something that you will reap in many lifetimes in the future. And so this completes the teaching.